Okay. Right. So I've not read this for a while, but I'll have a little bit of fun with this first of all. Because when the Lord first gave me this poem, I'll just bring it the way the Lord told me to bring it first of all, shall I? So, the poetic short gospel. I want to give you the gospel within this short poem. It's all about Jesus and you getting to know him. Thank you. The Lord said that is simply that. If you want the gospel, it's all about Jesus and getting to know him. So, I'll carry on. I want to give you the gospel within this short poem. It's all about Jesus and you getting to know him. Because it isn't about works or the things that you do. It's about Christ on the cross and the things he went through. And it ain't about the things that you'll overcome. It's about Jesus and the thing. It's about Jesus and the things that he's already done. And it's really nothing to do with the things that you've gained from the things that you lost. It's all about God and the Son and the price that they paid on the cross. And it's not just about your life that was taken a whole new direction. It's about his death on the cross and his resurrection. And when you truly know, when you truly know what he's done for you, then you'll receive salvation. And through God showing you the truth of his Son, and then you know the truth of salvation. And there you will see your sin forgiven and paid for through Christ, through Jesus Christ. And then you will see the true cost and the price. And then you shall know your purpose in life and who you are and where you're going. And that the good news of the gospel is all about knowing. Knowing Christ is the truth and that he brought you your salvation. And through the grace you've received for your sin, you'll go and tell and preach Jesus Christ and the good news to every nation.
Good one. You can do another one, or is that it?
Got some more in there, isn't he?
It's an everlasting supply, isn't it?
I've never read this one out loud before. Jesus isn't a character from a history story. Jesus is the Son of God, and to him goes all the glory. And Jesus wasn't a magician performing wonders and signs. Jesus was with God and the Holy Spirit at the beginning of time. And Jesus isn't just our God or even just the great I am. Jesus is Emmanuel, God is with us, for Jesus was a man. Yes, Jesus was a man whom went through things that we'll never experience or go through. But just know, Emmanuel, our God is with us, suffered the same things for the likes of me and you. And Jesus wasn't just a teacher, a prophet or rabbi. Jesus was the one who healed the sick and brought sight to the blind man's eye. And Jesus Christ isn't just a name within a holy book. For Jesus told the fishermen that they would now fish for men and that he would be the hook. And Jesus isn't just a Messiah, and Jesus isn't just a Son. For through him, in him, for him, all things that were created. For Jesus Christ is the three in one. And Jesus didn't die to be the hero, and he wasn't the reason his flesh was torn and ripped. Jesus died for the reconciliation, love of God. For Jesus died for relationship. And Jesus wasn't just the sacrifice, or even though he was the lamb. Jesus is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. Jesus always was the plan. So you can read all about Jesus in the Bible, and from the front and to the back, and then from the back and to the start. But the Bible will only be a book of information if you don't let Jesus come and live inside your heart. For Jesus doesn't live in a church building that's made of bricks and mortar. Jesus is the cornerstone of God's living church, and his bricks are us, his chosen son and daughters. And Jesus isn't just within our good deeds, and he isn't defined by the things we do. Jesus is defined in how we stand and witness to him, and how it's his name that gets us through. But when you know and what Jesus is, then your spirit heart will burst and want to sing. Because for all the things that Jesus is truly are, the fact that Jesus is everything.
Charlie's going to have to read one as well.
Go on, Charlie.
I'm not sure, it's not like that. Don't let the devil get hold of you. Follow God's will and your life will be true. Follow your dreams and God will review. You'll have a purpose and your action it's due. Don't overthink things or you will be blue. You are part of God's army, you're one of the crew. God gives us the nourishment of good food to chew, and you and your heart will renew. So follow your heart and righteous life and pursue.
Right, so this next session I'm going to rhyme. No, I'm not. So I thought what we'd do now is I'd like to get everyone on the streets. Who's up for it? One. Anybody else? What? Come on.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah. Listen, you're free. I'm just going to give you some tips. This is how Jim's idiot guide to doing street outreach. Okay, so here are some tips. Tip number 1 is it's the spirit of the sovereign Lord that's on you, and therefore you can relax. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And so we're gonna give an hour of time where we're gonna follow the Spirit and where He leads us. Okay, and if we don't speak to anybody about Jesus this afternoon, that's absolutely fine. Okay, I don't want anybody to do this out of a sense of, well, I've got to do something. I've got to speak to people. I've got to do. No, you've got to be the way. My advice is the way to follow the Spirit is to not put yourself under pressure. When you feel you've got to perform, when you feel you've got to do, well, Jim said I've got to say this and I've got to say that and I've got to do that and then I've got to say that, and then you're performing and the Spirit's not flowing through you. So it really is fine if we come back in a bit and we say, how did we get on? And nobody's spoken to anyone. We're going to be fine because do you know what we did? We pressed in. Do you know what I mean? And so we've got to settle that in our hearts. My friend Paul, we did about 2 or 3 years of going out every week on the streets, and the first thing we always had to do, we never wanted to do it. Do you know what I mean? Because we always felt nervous, and we always felt like we're idiots, and we always felt like no one's going to listen to us, and we always feel nervous because it's never comfortable, is it? I mean, most of us don't find it comfortable to go and speak to people on the streets. But nevertheless, if we chill ourselves out and say, do you know what? If I don't manage, if I don't do it today, that's fine. Yeah. Jesus loves me. I'm His child. It's all good. So nobody's got anything to prove to anybody. Okay, so that's my first tip. It's God that does it, and within that, I would say, let's seek to be led by the Spirit. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you see people stood on the streets, trying to speak to everybody. Oh, let me tell you about Jesus. Let me tell you about Jesus. Let me tell you. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, it's almost all rejection, isn't it? It's almost all no. Do you know what I mean? And that's fine. I mean, people rejected Jesus left, right, and centre. They walked away, they disowned Him, they abandoned Him, they rejected Him. So if you get rejected, if you get abused, if somebody doesn't like what you're saying, then it all happened to Jesus. So it's nothing to do with you being good or bad at it, because Jesus was pretty good at talking about Jesus. Do you know what I mean? Feel free. But what I'd say is, before you go out, take a few minutes and say, okay, God, where do you want me to go? Do you want me to go right here or left? Do you know what I mean? Is there a colour that you want to reveal to me? Or is there somebody with a red coat on? Is that what? Do you know what I mean? I don't want to say it because I want the Spirit to lead. But what's He saying? Where's the Spirit leading? And then while you're walking around, walk around and think, okay, Jesus, who are you highlighting? Now, what I need to say at this point is that Jesus doesn't tend to give us a beaming light. I mean, if you get like, so I know somebody that when they hear from God, they see the writing over the person, and they read it and then tell them. That's not what happens to me. My experience is I get a little bit of a feeling like maybe that one. Do you know what I mean? It's a very thin kind of thing. But over the years, I've learned to follow that nudge, and often we end up having a conversation and something good happens. Ask the Spirit to lead. Jesus sent out the 12 in pairs. So we're going to get you to get into teams of 2 and work together. Do you know what I mean? And it could be that one of you is more confident than the other, and that's fine. Let the more confident one do some more of the speaking. That's absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with that. The other person could be praying, and sometimes when you are speaking, you get a bit because you get a bit nervous about what you've got to say. The other person can say, "Hang on a minute, I just feel like God might be saying this," and then something wonderful happens. So in pairs and follow the Spirit. So important. It's not what we can do; it's what He can do through us. There are some things that in our culture that don't work very well in terms of attracting someone's attention. So excuse me, if you've got a few minutes, it's not a good opening line because nobody's got a few minutes. No. Do you know what I mean? Sorry, mate, I'm busy. Is always the answer to that question. And so ask God to give you something that is like can just grab someone's attention. Do you know what I mean? So I mean, some of the things that I've used over the time are things like, we're praying for some people. Can I pray for you? Let me ask you a question. If you could change one thing about your life, what would it be? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and there's a conversation. Because what you're trying to do is get a conversation with someone. You're not switching on a tape machine. Do you know what I mean? And Jesus saying, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and you're reciting your message. Now, you're trying to get a dialogue, aren't you? You're trying to get a conversation with someone so that there can be a connection. Do you know what I mean? So think about what is a good opening gambit and ask the Spirit to lead you in that. This story is as old as the hills, but it's one of my favourite stories. On one occasion I spoke to somebody and I have my set things that I might say, and I said to someone, and I bet you've heard this story before because it's really old. But when I said, my opening line was, "Hi, when I say the name Jesus to you, what comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?" This guy beamed at me and said, "It's me." And I said, "What do you mean it's you?" And he was from Portugal. His name was Jesus. And we led him to the Lord. So anyway, we led Jesus to the Lord. So his name was Miracle Yesu, which means Miracle Jesus. That was his name. And he came to our church. But do you know what I mean? But follow what's the Spirit. This nudges for the Spirit. And I honestly think if you go out for an hour today and you don't get anything, I honestly think that's okay. Because you're looking, it's not a one-hit thing. Let's try and develop a lifestyle where we are up for telling people about Jesus. Jesus, the Great Commission was go and make disciples of all nations. Do you know what I mean? And frankly, we, the Western church, just not doing it. Just not doing it. Most Christians haven't led anyone, haven't made a disciple. And we've got to fix that, haven't we? So we've got to be determined to be in the game, have a go at it.
Can I just tell 2 stories?
Yeah.
Just from the city. And one involves Paul, I hope you don't mind. Me and Paul used to go out all the time in the city.
Yeah.
We were walking through the high street. Remember we was walking through the high street and them canvassers who tried to stop you and sell you something.
Yeah.
We was walking through the city and we were being led and one of them stopped Paul and said, "Can I have a minute at a time?" And Paul said, "Okay, but can I pray for you?"
Yeah.
And you prayed with him, didn't you? Remember? When we was going through the city. And another time we was out, I think we was out with Dee, Al. It was me, Dima, Paul and someone else. And we ended up in the mosque. Just being led by the Spirit in the city. We was walking around and praying and we ended up in the mosque going, just being led to the mosque to have conversations there. So, yeah, it's a part which I want to encourage, really.
Yeah. Be led by the Spirit. Yeah. So be led by the Spirit. Don't be under pressure. Ask God to sort of give you a good opening line. But if he doesn't, use one of mine. Do you know what I mean? You know, if you could change one thing about your life, what would it be? Or can I pray for you?
My small group leader didn't know about today much, but she gave me a go and said you might want to give them out.
Yeah, I've got some other things as well. Yeah. Being accepted. What is it?
There's all different ones.
I just want to check it's kosher because
No,
you know.
it's all kosher.
Yeah, these are.
Yeah.
I give these the stamp of approval. You may use those. Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's just like going out.
Yeah. So I'm not a big fan of just giving out.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Give out when there's a conversation that's been had, and you know.
Yeah.
You know, I say it all the time, but we've got two of these, one of those, and the gospel is a connection with someone. It's not just you spouting on. Do you know what I mean? And so really, the first thing you're trying to do is connect with a person and find out something about that person. I heard some time ago somebody say to me that the gospel is someone's story. It takes someone's story to its climax. It's like everyone's got a story, right? And the gospel is the thing that will take that story to its, fruition. Do you know what I mean? And so half of what we're trying to do is listen and hear something about someone's story. There's loads of examples of people I've chatted to that it's been their story that's opened up and the gospel is so broad. It's got something to say about everything. It isn't just you're a sinner, Jesus died for you. There's so much to the gospel. Do you know what I mean? And even sometimes the critic, even sometimes the person that's that spouts off. I remember a guy. I spoke to someone. I said, when I say Jesus, what does it make you think? And he said, well, you don't love me. And I said, what do you mean? Tell me about it. He said, well, you can't love me. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, my girlfriend's just had we had a baby, and the baby was several months old, and it just died. You tell me Jesus loves me. And you know what I mean? What do you do? So I was able to. This is a guy. He was smoking weed around the back, and I was able to sit with him. I said, you can't not be moved by that sort of story. So we both shed a bit of a tear, and I said, you know what? That's not an indication of God not loving you. Let me tell you about God's plan for the world. The world is broken, and crappy things happen to good people. And there's sometimes no logic for it. But I can tell you now that is not God not loving you. And that he does love you. And I was able to hold this guy's hands. I said, do you mind if I hold your hands? It's a bit weird. And I prayed, and I said, God, would you reveal the love of God to this man in his pain? And I said, Jesus told a story, one of his first early sermons. He said, blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom. And then he said, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Yeah. And I don't know what happened, and sometimes we sow a seed, and that's fine, and we walk away and we let God do what he does. I don't know what happened with that guy, but I can tell you he knew that actually he could take his grief to God after that exchange. And so, do you know what I mean? There's all sorts of things that we can do, but we listen to the story. Don't preempt what you've got to say. Listen and respond to what's going on in that person's life. Because there's all sorts of stuff. So I can't stress that enough, really. And I think, the early offer to pray, it's very few people say no to prayer, actually. Do you know what I mean? I think. Do you mind if I pray for you? What they're expecting is you go home and say a prayer. Do you know what I mean? But then you just start praying. And it's amazing what can happen. I've seen atheists healed on the streets when I say, "Just can I pray for you?" God can do stuff that we can't. There comes a time when we want to then present something of what the gospel is. Do you know what I mean? And so, Paul talks about always be able to give a reason for the hope that's within you. I don't know how you feel about that, how confident you feel to be able to say, well, this is the gospel. And in this room, there'll be different degrees of confidence in that. But I've got some cards here. It's a thing that we've used a bit. Sorry? Well, your wife did them. So, Leanne, can you put it on the? Oh, there it is. Have you seen this before? Have a look at this one. I need a pointer. What I found this quite helpful. Just to have one of these in my back pocket. I've got that drawing that you can just use. And basically, if we start over here, right, in the top right circle, and say this is our world, right? You can use the card. You can point to it. This is our world. And to be honest with you, it wasn't always meant to be like it is. God made the world, and it was perfect. And there was a relationship with people, and it was harmony between God and man, and there was beauty in the world. But then we, or the people, disobeyed God and said, "I don't want to live for God anymore," and we call that sin. And that put us over here in this broken world where there's stuff that happens. You just have to put the TV on and watch the news to see that the world is a bit broken. And we try all sorts of things. These are the little zigzag things. We try all sorts of things to escape the brokenness. I don't know if you've done anything to escape the brokenness, but it might be, a relationship, it might be you think money, whatever it is, you fill in the blank. What do you do to try and escape this brokenness? But the truth is, we keep ending back here in this broken world. But the good news is that Jesus came. He came down and he died for our sin so that we could be forgiven. And if we decide to turn our lives around and make him the Lord of our lives, we repent, we turn around, we make him the Lord of our lives, it says that he makes us a new creation. And he puts us in a relationship with him that is unspoilt again, a close relationship with him. And then we can know him and be in that relationship with him. But then he puts us back, where it says go there. He puts us back into the broken world to go and tell others about what it is to follow Jesus. And that's, in a nutshell, something of the good news of Jesus. Do you know what I mean? So feel free to take some of these with you. Have a little practice of it. But there was a time in the Bible when Saul was going to fight Goliath. David was going to fight Goliath, and they gave him Saul's armor, and they said, "Put this on, and you'll be all right." And David's like, "I can't even flipping move in this stuff." And sometimes you can learn a method of how to do evangelism from someone like me, or you can look at something like that and think, "Well, it's a bit clunky, Jim. It doesn't work for me." Do what works for you. Do you know what I mean? But if you want to take some of these, we've got some cards there with a psalm on it. They're just helpful things to be able to use, to be able to explain.
Good question to ask after the back of that. So that's always where do you see yourself in that picture?
Yeah, sorry, good point. So that's, sorry, Alex. You do say, where are you? Are you here? Are you here? Have you turned around with Jesus? Are you over here with God? And almost everyone will say, "No, I think I'm here," or they'll say, "I'm not interested, mate. Jog on, will you?" And that's fine, because they said that to Jesus as well. And then you're able to pray with them and ask them the question, would you like to turn around? And would you like to make Jesus the ruler, the person in charge of your life? Would you like to give your life to Jesus? And sometimes we don't ask that question because we don't think they will. But actually, do you know what? Some people do. Because here's the thing. All the time, Jesus is drawing people to himself. Do you know what I mean? So that's why we follow the Spirit. So the trick shot is to be in tune with the Spirit so that he leads us to the people that he's drawing. Let me tell you one story. I heard this story this week. And it was a friend of mine in Egypt, working in Egypt, planting a church, not an easy environment. And one of the things, to the questions, one of the questions he's learned that's a good question to ask in that context is, have you had any dreams lately? Okay, because it seems to be God's doing a lot of giving people dreams in the Middle East. So anyway, he said, he saw this person and felt the nudge of the Spirit, because you've got to really feel the nudge of the Spirit to preach the gospel in a country where it's illegal to preach the gospel. Felt the nudge of the Spirit, and he said, have you had any dreams recently? And the person said, wow, why did you ask me that? I had a really interesting dream. And that's what she said, tell me about the dream. He said, well, in the dream, I was really thirsty, and I got some water, and I was drinking this water, and I was feeling so quenched by this water. And then this man in white appeared to me and said that he had water that was living. And if I drink this water, I'll never thirst again. And he said, what does that mean? And of course, he was then able to get his Bible out and say, there's a story in the Bible of a lady at a well. And this is the story, what's happened to you in your dream is what happened in this story in the Bible. And that person was like amazed that her dream, Jesus was appearing to her in a dream. So, that's the dream. If we can have a few of those stories this afternoon, that'll be champion. That'll be great. Are there any questions?